Hello and welcome back, and today I want to talk about affordable one-bay NAS, because so many of you out there are thinking about buying your first network attached storage device, but because the technology is quite new or you don't really know how much of an extent you're going to be using the device, you want to make sure you get the most of your money. You want to invest in something like this, but at the same time you don't want to overspend for something you're not going to need. And all too often most people's first NASs end up being ones that they buy kind of as a gadget, as a little plaything, and it'll be a one-bay NAS such as these two. Now, on my left, your right, we are looking at the QNAP, the TS-131p. It's available now from the guys at span.com, as well as, of course, other vendors are available, and it's available for about 120 to 130 quid. It's not the cheapest. You can find it in a lower price in some places, but I recommend you go for somewhere a little bit more legitimate because of the warranty. And this goes once again for about 120, 130 quid without the VAT and without a hard drive. The Synology, on the other hand, what was released earlier last year, is the DS119j. It is their lowest priced disk station NAS. That is to say that with this one bay NAS, you've got access to their great first party software, Disk Station Manager. It's a more streamlined version of DSM 6.2, but it does give you access to that great first party software, and of course all of the things for client and mobile apps and more. I've always talked on this channel over and over again about when comparing these two brands, just to remember that QNAP has good first party software but a better support of third party software, whereas Synology has great first party software but less support of third party applications. Now, the thing about a one bay NAS is the first thing you have to remember is, of course, there is no RAID storage. RAID involves having multiple drives, with drives acting as kind of safety nets to your data. But it doesn't stop you having backups. You can back up these over the network via rsync and other means to back these up to other NASs on the network. You can back up via USB, because both of them feature USB ports that I'll talk about later. And on top of that, you can migrate and synchronize with third-party cloud platforms such as Google Drive, DropBox, and more. Both of them support surveillance software called Surveillance Station. It's their own respective versions. And both of them support multiple IP cameras when connected, though it's worth mentioning that you can have more cameras on the QNAP NAS than you can on the Synology. Both of them support DLNA media playback on things like smart TVs, PlayStation 4, Xbox One, NVIDIA, Shield, Sonos, and more, but because of the hardware that we're going to talk about later on, that it does perform better on the QNAP. Now, let's focus to start with on this Synology, the DS119j. This one bay NAS, it's not hot swappable, it's all closed in environment. On the front there, you've got LEDs that give you real-time information about the hard drives inside, as well as network access and system access. There's ventilation on that front panel, if you bring that a little bit more to camera. The sides of the panel are ventilated on the Synology logo, and there's more ventilation on the base. And if we look at the rear, we can see multiple ports available. We can see USB 2 ports there, which can be used for connecting external drives, but of course you will be limited by USB 2 speeds, and a network port that lets you connect this device to the internet. Sorry, blame my cat for my hand there. And finally, you've got a fan here on the rear to keep the device nice and cool running throughout. And because of the plastic chassis, no tray, and that tiny fan there, noise levels are significantly lower on this than most devices. And that's it for that. If you want to install a drive, there's two screws on the rear that you remove, but I've already removed them in advance. The side of the chassis comes off, and there on the table is the inside of the device, and it supports up to the very latest and largest SATA hard drive. This is a Seagate Iron Wolf 14 TB drive. If you pop that drive there and you literally slide it in, and that drive's connected. There's screw holes on either side, and there you go. When you boot up the device, it will install Disk Station Manager on your media. Of course, it isn't hot swappable, not only because there isn't a tray, but if you did pull out this drive, the whole system would collapse. So that is the DS119j, and the internals are a dual-core Marvell ARM 32-bit chip known as the Marvell Armada 3700. I had to check my notes there. And that CPU is an 800 MHz dual-core CPU, which is incredibly low-powered compared with a lot of other devices I have seen. But the real kicker is the memory. It's only 256 megabytes of memory, which is very small indeed, and it will make multitasking between different applications very tough indeed. I will follow up more on this point later in the video, but I will say that this does not give you a very good representation of the Synology Disk Station Manager software, but I'll elaborate on that later on. So let's move that off camera, and now we're going to look at the QNAP. Now, of course, it's more expensive, so let's see how it justifies that extra spend. For a start, the front of the device has got LEDs, once again for system, network and drive access. There's also a USB 3 port on the front for one-touch USB backups with a button, so you can connect a USB drive to this device and then back up the contents of the USB onto the NAS with versioning with multiple copies of that data, or with a large enough external drive, back up the contents of the NAS onto the drive. Now, a number of you may have noticed the tray. I still don't understand why this device has a tray. There's so many confusing aspects of this, because the tray, don't get me wrong, you can install 3.5-inch and 2.5-inch drives on those holes you can see on the tray, but with a one-bay NAS, you will never, ever, ever, ever want to remove the drive if there's only one drive. And trays are for hot swapping. That is to say, changing a drive while the device is in use. And because you've only got one drive, you wouldn't ever want to risk the security and rigidity of your data by removing the drive. So I'm not quite sure why there's a tray. Very peculiar. There's ventilation here built into the side, and on the base of the device, a little bit of ventilation there for that extra drive. And if we go to the rear of the device, bring that up to camera once again, we can see that there is two more USB ports. I'm going to get rid of my manky finger there. We can see two USB 3 ports there for, once again, external storage drives, wireless dongles and other supported USB devices. On top of that, we have got a LAN port as well that allows us network connectivity. Of course, link aggregation isn't available, and you wouldn't really see the benefits of link aggregation with just the one drive unless you were using a USB. So that's something not to worry about. And finally, a fan here. Now, straight away, one of the things about this device I like is the internal hardware. We put that there like that, because this device arrives with another dual-core ARM, but this is a dual-core 1.7 GHz Annapurna CPU. 1.7 gig, so twice the power output of the CPU in the Synology, and on top of that, the CPU is far more proficient too. And that 1.7 dual-core CPU is paired with 1 GB of memory. That's 4 times the memory of the Synology we showed earlier on. And thanks to that, you get a lot more for your money. That Annapurna AL212 chip inside here, paired with that memory, gives your, let's face it, rather modestly priced NAS a lot of utility. And you can run most of the home QNAP NAS applications as well as a number of third-party applications too. So again, more users can access this at once, and less CPU and memory will be utilized by those apps than they would be on the less hardware enabled and less efficient hardware on that Synology mentioned earlier on. So again, there is a price difference between them that cannot really be overstated. Both of them are the lowest priced NASes of their respective brands, which is very, very good. But at the same time, the Synology DS119j, because they've sold it at such a low price with such poor hardware, two things are going to happen. One, lots of users are going to buy this because they're trying to buy a cheap NAS and they'll be won over by that very low price tag. But the second thing will happen then, because it's such a poor representation of the software, a lot of users are not going to be able to differentiate that low internal hardware with that poor experience, and they're going to migrate over to another NAS brand. And that's the problem here, because they're both pretty good one-bay NASes, as one-bay NASes go. But the TS-131p manages to be a good NAS and a one-bay NAS. The Synology seems to just be a one-bay NAS, and as much as I like Synology and love their software, it really does let it down overall. It's not all bad. There are lots of reasons why the Synology is still a very good NAS. Number one is definitely the quieter running of the two. Putting the same drive into both of these two devices, the Synology will make significantly less noise due to its thinner plastic chassis, no tray, and less rugged construction internally, and also that lack of tray at all. Also, the Synology software is still going to be a lot more user-friendly. Don't get me wrong, the hardware is going to struggle and you will see more lag the more you use it. But if you've never used a network attached storage device before, you're going to feel the DSM is easier on you, but it's not much of a learning curve to learn how to use the QNAP, and although it is a lot more rugged in its construction and will produce a pinch more noise, there's no denying that this is a far better constructed device. If we put them on their side, I'll show you. Although you can't really make it out, if I do that there, it's very, bring that to the mic, it's very thin plastic, that one. And although this is plastic as well, it's far thicker and it's got a much better metal internal than the Synology. The Synology has just one metal panel inside and that backplane. Although it reduces noise, it's not very rugged in structure, and although it doesn't have to be, it depends where you're going to be storing this NAS in your home or office. But that has been the DS119j versus the TS-131p. Me personally, I would suggest you go for this one from QNAP, but if your budget's real tight and you need a NAS, the 119j is still a very good NAS indeed, and definitely worth a look. Just don't expect miracles. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to click like and subscribe. I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you next time.